Hi everybody, so this is Sarah Jane Kenny and I'm going to be presenting the assistive technology evaluation I did for my mother. I'm actually using a pseudonym for her, so the name I gave her is Marion Foster. And I performed the assistive tech evaluation due to some issues she's having with her vision and, well, I'll tell you guys some more about it. So Marion is 65 years old. And she's been nearsighted really for most of her life. She's also been really quite athletic, so it's never impacted her sort of daily goings-ons. But then 5 to 10 years ago, she doesn't remember exactly when, she was diagnosed with cataracts in both eyes, and then 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with Fuchs dystrophy. So that is a condition that causes deterioration of the corneal cells. And her doctor described her condition as in a moderate state and advancing really pretty quickly. Definitely, under these circumstances, I would want to talk to her optic surgeon if I could, but just with the timing, it wasn't possible at this time. So, Marion lives alone in a 4-bedroom house in upstate New York. And work isn't really a concern as she works a part-time retirement job. She says that she doesn't really need any adaptive equipment for her work. But she is a very active homeowner and pet owner. She finds that her vision has really dominated what she can and can't do in her life for the past 5 years. She's not driving when she wants to. She can't drive at sunset or sunrise or at night. She basically stopped reading, and I mean, when I was growing up, my mother always had a book, so that was a really very dramatic change. And it's also caused a lot of social restriction and has really created a sense of poor self-esteem, and we can hear that from her herself. I did not get permission for a video clip. My mom is a little camera shy, but I do have the audio right here for you.
Different considerations you're kind of dealing with. I mean, I guess I want to ask you, if you need to add in more items that can only be used at specific amounts of time. I mean, does it feel overwhelming to think about, or?
I wouldn't say it feels overwhelming to think about. It annoys me. I think it's more of an anger issue than an overwhelming issue.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just angry this is happening and I shouldn't be.
I mean, I don't blame you.
Other people. Huh?
I don't blame you. Okay. So, but in general, I guess what I'm trying to get at is if there was...
I'm open to finding out about anything. It's not overwhelming to find out. It may... Yeah, I mean, it creates a little anxiety, but not in the sense that I don't want to know about it.
Okay.
The same thing like talking, trying to describe this. It irritates me to think about it and describe it to someone. I don't like to think of myself as having an infirmity, and I know I do. I don't like to describe to people how I have to restrict my activity. I don't like to think about it. I like to be reminded of it. But I do. I kind of like it.
Okay.
So definitely part of what that told me is that when I'm looking for AT solutions, I did want to allow her to, have a lot of control over any decisions and also keep any AT a little on the more discreet side because she is very self-conscious of her vision status.
Different considerations you're kind of...
Okay. So my mom has a lot of strengths. She's physically and cognitively quite healthy. She has a positive attitude, definitely, towards trying new things, and she's also fortunately very tech-savvy. So those were all pluses. As far as her challenges, the Fuchs and the cataracts have led to really very severely diminished acuity, but also a sensitivity to light. She also describes that she gets discomfort whenever she's looking at a single point or roughly a single point, like say a computer screen for any length of time. And then sometimes when she's trying to help one aspect of her vision, others are undermined. So bright light helps her see in greater detail, but it causes eye pain if the ambient lighting around her is not bright enough. So she's installed positionable lamps just all over her house so that she can see objects in greater detail when she needs to, but the brightness, because her house is otherwise dark, does cause a lot of discomfort. So she said that what her greatest difficulties are, and what she wanted me to focus on, were her ability to navigate and find objects in her house, to find, sort, and use items and tools for home repair, to use her computer more easily to shop or read quick news stories, and to be able to read product information on household items quickly and easily. She's one of those people who always saves the product manual and wants to read it cover to cover. But if she's anymore trying to read, say, a manual or even just a prescription, she needs to walk from room to room to try all these different combinations of natural and artificial light and light from her adaptive lamps, and understandably that's causing a lot of frustration. So because I felt that Marion's concerns were really quite complex, I did the brainstorming and organizing of my recommendations in a chart form. So here, following the human activity assistive technology model, I introduced the human. I introduced the activity. I also talked, though, about the environment it's occurring in, the compounding concerns, any adaptations she's already tried, because, as I mentioned, she has used some. And then I made my IT recommendations and also give suggestions for assessment, if there's any that could be used in determining the efficacy of the AT. So let's take a look at one of these activities. The first one was finding clothing and small items in her house more easily. So as I mentioned, her house is very big and very dark, and she tends to really prefer dark colors for her furnishings. And we can hear a little bit of that from her.
All right, so as far as the surfaces that you usually lose things on, are we talking, where do you find yourself putting things down that then you're not seeing?
The couch, the chair, the coat rack.
Okay.
So if I put my coats on my coat rack, if I put two coats that are dark colored next to each other, I can't always find them. And it's not easy to find. And you know that I have two lights in my foyer.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, that does help us remember to put them on, but it's frustrating not to just walk by and say, oh, there's my coat, there's my hat, because I hung it up.
Okay.
The couch, if I put the Columbia sweatshirt next to my robe, I can't always find it. If I put my socks on the floor, my dark socks in the morning on the room carpet, I can't always find them.
Okay.
I have to put on more lights.
So basically, she wants to be able to just find things by glancing around the room. So I think that you can probably hear the tension in her voice, and to try to alleviate some of that, as I was making my preliminary suggestions and kind of testing the waters, I did try to bring some humor into the interview. Unfortunately, I do know my mother, so I was able to at least get a little bit of a chuckle out of her. Here's where I suggest some solutions just ongoing.
Yeah, because definitely one environmental modification, you would think about is, can you kind of redo, or at least when you do your space in the future, keep the environmental colors lighter. And that is hard when it works with personal taste.
It is. As much as I hate my white floor, I do know when I get up in the middle of the night, the white floor with just the low ambient lighting, I can sing.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy I don't have a dark floor, because I trip sometimes on the cushions if they're not out of my way or I'm disorientated. I try to keep everything clear when I come in from bed for my family room. But every now and then I bump into something because I can't see the difference. It never happens in the kitchen.
So, potential assistive technology solution, IKEA household makeover. I hope you like white and pine.
That very well could be.
That sounds like something out of your worst nightmares.
It very well could be.
Okay.
I think if I redid a couch or a chair, I hate light colors, but I may have to go to light colors. I'm not sure. I always wanted a brown leather couch. I'm not sure pretty beige one, you know?
Well, I mean, the other alternative could be, when I usually say put a coat down on the couch, it's over the back. I mean, if you kept a light colored throw blanket over the back, that would create the contrast. Without.
My throw blanket is blue, and actually that would create contrast. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, and.
Okay, so basically my process in just evaluating the AT, as you can see from this chart and from those clips of the interview, was just breaking down what are the interacting environmental and otherwise adaptive concerns, and then figuring out what AT works around that. So one issue that I thought of that my mom didn't explicitly bring up is that she is having some difficulty ascertaining the appearance or state of her house, like if the dog knocked over a plant or something. So one of my solutions for that was to actually increase the efficacy of her adaptive lights that she's already purchased by adding diffuse ambient lighting to the house. Because when there isn't that ambient light in the house and the house is really quite dark, that's what's giving her eye discomfort and why she's sometimes avoiding using the adaptive lighting. So to continue, the other activity was selecting, say, correct hardware or tools. And this is where the solutions got a little bit more high-tech. I researched video magnifiers as well as glove lights. I have an example of that later on. And for example, the outcome could be assessed, like say of the video magnifier, based on asking Marion to identify the specifications of the hardware, first without the video magnifier and then with it, to get a sense of the percent correctly identified. That would give a very quantitative measure. The fourth activity is then being able to say read markings on hardware. So a video magnifier could help with that, but also optical character recognition applications, which can simply be downloaded onto a smartphone, and then text-to-speech to read the scan that is taken from the OCR. Last two, again, reading labels and instruction manuals. That issue could pretty easily be solved with optical character recognition and text-to-speech. So some of the solutions for one problem are also solving another problem. And then lastly, for shopping online for her personal needs or just reading her news stories, there's a whole suite of different adjustments for the computer that, I couldn't recommend the specific adjustments. I think that she would need to test them out herself. But for example, there's the night light adjustment in Windows 10 where you can alter contrast and also the strength of the blue lighting and kind of warm up the tone of the light. You can also use various color filters, adjust brightness, which she does do already, and disable animations. So I made all those suggestions and also created an appendix on how to navigate all of those various accessibility features. Alright, so here's one of my product pages that I created. I did not create these for the items that really depend on my mom's aesthetic sensibilities, so I didn't create product pages for throw blankets or for her lighting. I just suggested the sorts of types of things that she could use, as you already saw on the chart. But these flashlight gloves I did create a product page for. So for example, these just go over the hand and allow focal lighting wherever you're pointing. So that could help her get a little bit more light in awkward spaces, obviously to be used conjunctively with better ambient light. Otherwise, they're not going to be very effective. And then another example of a product page I created as I was browsing the most ideal video magnifiers for her. Because my mom does do a lot of home repair, home improvement projects, she's kind of here, there, and everywhere through her house, which, as I already said, is very large. So having a video magnifier mounted on a table or set up in that way is not really going to help her. She needs something handheld and portable. And the nice thing about the Optelec Compact 7 is that it's reasonably large for a portable magnifier. It's a 7-inch screen. It allows a lot of brightness adjustment, and she can take it with her wherever she's going. I did have other product pages, obviously, in the full report, but just for the sake of brevity, I wanted to keep it at those two. Now, here what you're seeing is the AT implementation survey. As I mentioned, if there were specific ways to quantify the efficacy of an adaptation, I included it in the chart. But in general, a good way to assess if these solutions work for my mom is to give her a before and after survey. So she's completed, or is in the process of completing, she's kind of procrastinating on it, the pre-survey. Just to give me some way to assess what is life really like kind of in terms of numbers before we implement solutions, and then we can see how it compares favorably or unfavorably or neutral after we implement those solutions. Then I just want to show you, this is an example of one of the appendixes that I included. So as you see, it just kind of breaks down different ways to alter color scheme, the lighting and the tone of the light, and eliminate the animations. As I said, my mother is fantastic with a computer, but I just figured when I'm asking her to make all these changes to Windows 10 on her computer, it's always good to have a little bit of a reminder. Last but not least, I also included some resources that are just really great fonts of information that she could browse if she wants to herself. So these include the American Foundation for the Blind has fantastic pages about AT for persons with reduced vision. I found that personally very, very helpful because I've never worked with anybody with reduced vision in my professional life. So these were all very, very new. The Low Vision Centers of Indiana also had great information. While it wasn't the focus of the evaluation, my mother was particularly interested in their bioptic driving initiative. So she's going to be reaching out about possibly if bioptic driving might be able to get her a little bit more mobile again after she makes all of the changes to her home that I recommended. Also just various other AT resource pages, the Google Chrome store for browser extensions, which they had like text-to-speech readers that could be very useful for her. Library of Congress information access, and then product pages for Optelec products, and also Freedom Scientific, which made another portable magnifier that I featured in the full AT report, but did not feature in the PowerPoint for purposes of brevity. One thing I want to note is I am sorry for the kind of little subdued color scheme and transitions of my project, but hopefully you noticed that these are colors and transitions that would be the least problematic for somebody with the visual issues that my mother has. So I made it a presentation that she would be able to read fairly comfortably. Thank you so much, and this was an amazing process, and I am so happy to have learned how to do a proper AT eval.